back at you today with gloves off. And today we have Judge Danny Valdez, and we're going to talk about politics and the growth of Webb County and what's in it in the future. Good morning, Judge. How you been?
Good morning, Paul. It's great to be here with you. It's nice to see you. And
it's a pleasure.
You know, always a pleasure to come in and just talk. Me gusta hablar mucho a mí, but I'm glad I'm here and look forward to the interview.
Let's touch base. You've always been around Webb County and the Webb County politics from back in the 80s. What got Danny Valdez into going into politics? What did you see? Why did you do it? ¿Qué pasó?
You know, somebody told me, I was, some years ago, I was in a debate, and my opponent says, no, Judge Valdez is a career politician. And I said, no, sir, I'm a career public servant. And basically, it stems from growing up, coming from the west side of Laredo.
Of course.
My father was an activist, Don Eliseo Valdez, an activist, always fighting for the rights of the people.
Correct. I remember him because he was a good friend with an uncle of mine, Fernando La Banana.
Sí, cómo no? Yes, sir. Yeah.
Holy Redeemer.
Correct. So it stems from growing up around that environment. Paul, my father leading the charge, always looking for the best interest of the working folk.
Exactly.
I know that he was one of the first ones that worked on unions to be able to get better working conditions for the workers, better wages. In fact, I remember being around him when they filed the first. They actually filed a lawsuit against Coca-Cola to be able to get better wages and better working conditions for the workers, the laborers. So we've been around that environment practically all my life, and it stems from that. And then
your brother was also
my brother was a councilman for 8 years, Eliseo. My brother-in-law was a councilman, Alfredo Gredano.
That's right.
So I come from a family and background of serving, of helping. Being in positions to be able to impact lives.
And you have, we know many of the public officials that are there on a personal basis, and some we haven't. And there's very few that are. Everybody's always wanting to help. There's some that are in the front, and some that would just agree with. Okay,
right.
And you've been one that's always been in the front, and you've always been one that has helped out the youth in front, doing programs for it way back when, and this is a long time ago. And there's other public officials that se quedan sentados, and then they'll say, "Can we do this project? Can we do this project?" And they'll say yes, but they're not the ones that are going to bring forth a project.
And I tell you, Paul, that the reason why, growing up, coming out of the west side, you're familiar with the west side.
They're from the Trece, that's where my father grew up.
Right. So coming from that environment and always recognizing the needs of the people. Right? So I think that helped me in me carrying that responsibility of getting to a position to impact lives. And I can tell you, I'm full of stories that have impacted my life and why I did the things that I did. I can share some with you.
Sure,
but
go ahead.
One of the ones, I ran in 1982. I was 27, 28. And back then, we talked about growth before we got on the show. The population was about 90,000. So the growth was just starting. And back then, as Justice of the Peace, I initiated a lot of programs for youth.
Yeah.
And I used to handle what's called truancy court.
Sure.
And the first case, I was 28. Back then, we didn't have a lot of agencies or a lot of alternatives to working with kids. It was mainly just shooting from the hip there at the court, on the bench. So they took this little boy, he was 9 years old, to court. What happened to him is he came from a broken home. The mother left the family, and the father assumed the responsibility of taking care of 6 kids at home.
Sure.
Of course, the dad couldn't deal with that. He couldn't deal with taking him to school, with the daily responsibility as the father.
Because it's hard.
His escape was getting up in the morning and he started to drink.
Yeah.
So the kid was truant at the age of 9, disruptive. He was already starting to get involved with drugs and gangs at that time, because back then the gangs were prevalent. So he was taken to court, and I remember talking to him. He was 9 years old, telling the dad, look, sir, you need to clean up your act, you need to stop drinking. You know, your responsibility is your son.
Exactly.
What I want you to do is get up in the morning, take him to school, and put him in the classroom, and you've done your job. That's it. Oh yeah, okay. So he left, and you know, then he came back again. He was already 10 years old, already heavily involved with drugs, already involved with gangs. The same situation. And I remember telling him, sir, if you don't stop drinking and pay attention to your son, he's going to end up in jail. He's going to end up dead. He's going to end up in the wrong side of the street. He left, same thing. I get a call at 2 o'clock in the morning, and back then, you know, I was a coroner. You know, I was the one that would have to go pronounce people dead. So as I was going into the emergency room, the dad was outside the emergency room, and the first thing he did is says, you know, Judge, we should have listened to you. I said, what happened, sir? He said, well, they just found my son with a gunshot wound to the head. So, you know, it was difficult because, you know, I started to second guess myself. Maybe I didn't do enough. Maybe I should have done more. That's when we started to implement the work on alternative schools, getting agencies involved like SCAN to be able to provide the counseling. So a lot of things changed because of that little boy. And I mean, just a little story because I'm full of stories that I can tell you that have impacted.
And when there's a horror story like this, everybody comes together, and we're talking about that with State Representative Raymond. And once you have a tragedy, everybody starts putting their heads together. They unifies us, okay? And many of us may not agree, but we all will come to an agreement right there of what needs to be done. And and again, you led the charge into alternative schools and I think,
other
programs.
Paul, it's important because I have firsthand knowledge of what can happen.
Of course.
I've dealt with that. I've seen it firsthand, and maybe some other people have not. But that's why, you know, you saw all of the things that I did, you know, when I was JP for 24 years.
Sure. And right after 24 years as JP, right after that, you jumped and became Webb County judge. And you changed a lot of things in Webb County because Webb County's always had a difference of political views and a difference of the way politics is done. And that sets us apart from the remainder of the counties, I say. It's a little bit different. You
know, in my decision to run for county judge in 2007, it wasn't so much looking for a title or looking for a position. For me, it's always been about impacting lives. You know, I did it there as a justice of the peace, but I started to say, well, how can I do more? Or how can I impact not only here, but the whole county? So back then, you know, we looked at the colonias, still didn't have any running water.
Some of them don't. I mean, it's something that we should be ashamed of. You know, a lot of laws were passed that, you know, you couldn't build those colonias, and they're still being built, and they're still being going forward. And I don't know. The infrastructure's not there.
Well, to tell you, when I came into office, the first thing that one of the emphasis was to develop a running water, and we were the first ones that developed running water, and the first ones to open up a water faucet in one of the colonias. The other thing that bothered me a lot was having the at-will title, employees having at-will title.
At will.
And basically, I've never liked that because of the fact that, you know, people would get fired for political reasons, and you know, I never liked that. Especially if we have somebody that's been working there for 15, 20 years, they're doing a good job, you know, and just because of the politics, they ended up getting fired. You remember, in one of the years, there were about 80 people that were fired.
Well, it's always happened, you know, if you were from one department and all of a sudden you have a new head come in, all of a sudden you were gone. A lot of people were just taken off because you didn't hold the sign.
Correct.
And that should not be.
And my thought process was, look, if you're doing a good job,
you should not be.
People will keep you. Just because of political reasons, you know, you end up losing your job. You know, that wasn't something that I wanted to change that.
And that was implemented when the civil service.
Well, we had to go through legislation.
Sure.
You remember, to be able to qualify for civil service is based on population. We didn't qualify because we didn't have the population numbers. We were under. I think it was 200, if I remember correctly, it was about 225, and we were not there yet. That was done. I think it was in 2009, 2010, more or less. So we had to go through legislation to be able to amend the law specific to Webb County to be able to introduce civil service. So we went through legislation. You know, it was filed.
Was it changed?
It was changed.
Was it changed, or was it just amended?
It was just specific to Webb County.
Okay.
It was specific to Webb County because we didn't qualify for because of the population. We were under. But we were able to get it done. Civil service was implemented for the protection of the employees. It doesn't mean that you couldn't be fired. It's just you have to go through due process. If you're doing a good job, you keep your job. If you mess up, then you go through the due process to be able to justify the termination. So it was historic because it had never been done. Webb County has always been an at-will county, and it was based on politics. So, but that was changed, and I think that was something that had never been done before. So, what I said I wanted to do, we did, and we developed the youth village. One of the things that we didn't have here was a drug rehab. Since I dealt with those issues, then I said, look, we need to have a drug rehab. It's still pending. There's funding there, but it still hasn't been completed. And it was at the youth village. If you remember the youth village, there were 3 components.
And we need that. And we need that. And we were listening several weeks ago. We were told that if we could not have some of the departments like that were taken away. Stuff for the drug now, apparently from the county, and that, to me, it looks like, why did you remove this? You don't want them. I don't know if it's true or if they did or whatnot, but that is something that if they did, shame on them, because that's something that we need to stop.
And I go back, Paul, to people that have not dealt with those issues.
Correct.
People that have not seen the problems. Anything that can help. Through drug rehab, to drug education. These are programs that are essential, especially with the growth, I've always said with growth comes problems. And I've seen that through the years. So it's unfortunate that things like that happen, but maybe the emphasis is something else. But to me, it's always been about, nipping it at the level where they're just starting. Yeah. And I go back, and I always carry this little boy throughout my career there. I've always, had him at the back of my mind.
Sure. That
we could have done something more, but we are doing now. I'm glad that we're doing now, but there's more to be done.
No, there's a lot more, and those stories resonate through every city here in the United States and throughout the world. And I'm for preventative programs, which we do not have many of.
See, and that was the whole issue of developing the youth village, is prevention before detention. Intervention, prevention before detention. Exactly. And that was the whole concept of the youth village. It wasn't about incarceration or detention right away. Is the intervention, the prevention, intervention through what? Through the drug rehab.
Exactly.
Through we developed the JJAP, which is an alternative school. Again, going back to thinking about what we saw, what I saw, what I went through when I was starting, and these are things that are now essential and part of what we need to do.
No, you're absolutely correct. We have to prevent any and I don't know if we have to go into after-school programs in schools or they're not being used correctly, but there's a lot of kids out there that are now both parents have to work, many of them. You have a lot of single parents out there, both fathers with kids and mothers with kids that are out there. And what's going on with those kids? If they're not active somewhere, they're going to be active in the street. And you know that the street, there's 2 sides to that road. There's a good side and the bad side.
Paul, the other thing that it just takes a lot of effort, a lot of, and there's people that do have that want to develop that effort, to want to help out, but there's some people that just, don't. But it cannot be for lack of effort, from first and foremost the parents.
Yeah.
I remember a lady. Again, I'm full of stories, but this lady I'll never forget. She goes to the court. She goes with a 5-year-old, and she goes to court and she said it in Spanish. Digo, aquí está, pues ya no puedo con él. Quiero que le dé un susto. Le dije, man, pero tiene 5 años. He's 5 years old. ¿Cómo que no puede con él? And then you look at the background, one of the things that I did, which I think is very, very important, why is that little boy there in court? It's very easy as a judge to say, okay, you're here, pay the fine, se acabó. But you need more than that. You need to go and make. I used to make home visits and knock on the door and say, now I know why the child is here in court. Look at where he lives. Look at the environment. So, but it takes a lot of effort, and you need to have people
that are willing to do that.
Exactly.
And that's what I said in the beginning. You're one of the ones that's always leading in front of them. And we were glad to have you, and we're glad that now things are going forward, and you're coming down here with your counsel, and hopefully some of these folks that are sitting in public offices can say, wait a minute, you know what? Let me get off my butt and start moving.
Again, it depends on the individual, but it also depends on people to go and visit with them and talk to them and tell them, look, we put you there. Now you've got to respond.
That's exactly right.
Hopefully, I know we have a lot of good people, good elected officials that have also, taken the lead and continued what I started.
There's others out there. We can name them, go down, name many from the past, all the way forward. And sometimes, people do not see that. But we thank everybody for standing up for us. Everybody that runs, everybody that goes into offices, we thank you because you're stepping up to change stuff towards the community. Sometimes we make good decisions, sometimes we make bad decisions, but that's just the way it is. You're not going to please everybody.
Right.
But going back to what you said about the mother, and I say this, parents, you have to be with your kids. I get a lot of kids coming in, a lot of parents calling, my kid's being bullied, my kid's doing this. And I tell them this, bullying stops with the parent, starts and stops with the parent.
Right.
And go, you don't want to bring them to my classes? There's plenty of martial art classes to take them to, okay? But you have to get your kid to get into that self-defense. You don't want to take them to martial arts? Take them into volleyball or baseball or what have you. Do it. Because you have to start building self-confidence and self-esteem. So you all are the ones that have to get them up. Everything else, you have to get involved. Don't blame the teacher. Do not blame the bully, and do not blame your kid. Blame yourself.
One of the things that I would do, Paul, because again, you're absolutely correct, and I always emphasize that everything starts at home. And I would tell the parents, look, all you have to do is just get up in the morning, take him by the hand, and leave him in the classroom. Now, once you leave him in the classroom, then it's up to the teacher to teach. But your obligation as a parent is to get him there. Don't depend on anybody else. Don't blame the teacher. Don't complain about the teacher. It's your obligation.
You're absolutely correct.
And I'll share another story with you, if you allow me. I know.
No. Go right ahead. We're here.
But I think it's important because this is what's out there. I had this lady go to court, and the grandmother was responsible for her daughter, and she took her to court. She was an elderly lady, and the little girl was very defiant. She was in middle school. So what she would do is, at night, she would get out through the window and go to Nuevo Laredo.
The little girl?
The little girl. And the grandmother couldn't handle her. Says, Judge, I'm 80, she's going to Nuevo Laredo, she's not listening to me, I can't control her. And I always thought about the little boy. I said, if this girl continues like that, where's she going to end up? So I said, look, a very defiant little girl. So I said, you know what? And back then I had developed a boot camp. And I said, you're a good candidate for boot camp. So I sent her to boot camp. And then I didn't see her anymore. I just didn't see her back anymore. So a couple of years later, I was having lunch, and the waitress looks at me. She comes up to me and says, Judge Valdez, there was about maybe 10 of us having lunch, talking, a couple of attorneys and judges, and says, Judge Valdez, I have something that I want to tell you. I said, do you remember me? And I looked at her, and right away I recognized her because she had a big forehead. I never forgot that forehead. So she looks at me, she goes, I have something that I want to tell you. He says, I didn't like you at all. I hated you. I would see you on TV, I would see you in the newspaper, and I didn't like you because you sent me to boot camp. And, I had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I had to get up and clean. I had to go to school. There's a lot of discipline that I had to go through, and I was upset. I was upset at you, and I have something that I want to tell you. I said, oh boy, she's going to let me have it here. So she goes, she says, you know what? But now I realize, Judge, he says, if you hadn't done that, I probably would have not graduated. He says, I'm getting ready to graduate from Nixon. I got a scholarship to go run track at Texas, back in Texas State. Dijo, and I want to thank you for doing that. So those are stories that I know that I impacted lives.
And you have.
And I know that I have, because I see it sometimes out on the streets, the students that went through the court. Now, we lost some along the way,
of course,
like the little boy, but I think we saved more than what we lost. And for me, again, it's always been about that, about how can we impact lives. So,
if you wanted to do, let's change a little bit. What would you have done? Well, what do you think you still needed to do that you can tell these public officials that are there in the county, you know what, this is something that I did not do, maybe you guys can take forward with? What do you think, Albie?
Well, I think going back, Paul, and looking at everything that I did, I think to the point that we're at now, you know, I think I did everything right. I think everything was done correctly. I think and I think the judges that took over, you know, continued what we started. I'm hoping and that this drug rehab gets done. I think we should have done that way back then.
Sure.
So, but now, I mean, the funding is there. It's just a matter of getting it done to finish that component of the youth village, because that's still lacking, the intervention.
Sure.
So maybe back then was, again, recognizing as the growth was coming, you know, that we had to follow that pattern of the growth, and to be able to do, you know, more intervention and prevention.
Sure.
But I know that we did a lot, and I think the judges that are there right now, I think, recognize that. A lot of them have implemented, you know, have like the drug court, which is the prevention. You've got the programs that focus on that.
Correct.
So that's needed. I mean, that's something that needs to continue. If there's funding that's available, then go get it, and use it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Let's touch base on the change of the civil service when you brought it in. You said you talked about we had to change it in legislation. Did State Representative Raymond help you all on that?
Yes, you know. And
what occurred with that?
I'll say it that you know, Richard carried the flag.
Sure.
That introduced the legislation because, again, we didn't qualify. And civil service is based on population.
Correct.
But I was very, very adamant that we needed to do that. And of course, through a resolution from the Commissioner's Court, we went through the state, through the legislature, and of course, Representative Raymond carried the flag. Of course, Senator Zaffarini was also part of it, because it had to pass. But there was no controversy. There was no negative. I think you know, the message that was carried, and with the facts that we had, because if you're an at-will employee, then yeah, okay, you get terminated, but they can turn around and do what? File a lawsuit.
Correct.
So there was lawsuits after lawsuits because, you know,
I can imagine, and it costs the county money.
Exactly. So because of civil service, you know, those lawsuits stopped. But more so than anything is job protection for the employees. But again, you know, it had to go through. I'm very familiar through the process to be able to get the laws changed or amended or a bill passed. I remember when I was a JP, we also went through the legislature to be able to pass laws to enforce the protective orders on domestic violence, which is something that I'm very passionate about, because I dealt with death, going back, Paul, to what I told you. And
I'm pretty sure that there were some protective orders that all of a sudden ended up in a death, and I'm pretty sure that occurred.
Correct.
You know?
I would see him in the court. You know, I would see him people going for a peace bond, for protection. That really the peace bond didn't have a lot of teeth. So then we started to look at protective orders that had a little bit more teeth. because they would get a peace bond, but the peace bond is just a piece of paper saying stay away from that individual, but there's no guarantee it's going to happen. So we went through legislation also to pass stricter laws that would apply to family violence. So
what changed in those laws?
If I remember correctly, I think it was having to post a bond to be able to have that protective order, or the protective bond to be able to maintain the peace. But it had to go through legislation also. So the thing is, going back
tremendous career. You're talking about
going back to the first-hand knowledge that I have, Paul, that I dealt with, that maybe other people haven't. Because I've seen it. I've seen death.
There's an old professor of mine used to say, martial art instructor used to say, you can never teach what you haven't lived. And that's your prime example of that. You're changing because you've experienced it. You know what? Let's change this because it's going to benefit us in the future. And if you've never experienced it, well, then what can you do?
With me, Paul, it's never been about how can I benefit.
Exactly.
It's how can the community benefit. It's always been that way, And even when I ran for county judge, the title, the prestige of being county judge really was not something that I was looking for. I was looking to see how we could impact lives in a broader sense, and that's what I did. I'm happy with the things that we've accomplished when I was county judge. Civil service was something big. The youth village. If you remember, we were kind of forced to develop fire and EMS services in the county. That was something that we also did. If you remember the history of fire and EMS services for the county. And we were relying on the city to provide those services. We were paying the city, I think it was $800,000 a year for fire and EMS services. But, we were kind of forced because, the city came back and said, well, you need to pay so much more to be able to provide those services. So we weren't able to agree because we couldn't afford it. So we had to develop our own fire and EMS services for the county, which we did. You remember the Cuatro Vientos is also a big project that we did. Cuatro Vientos Road. We had lost the funding from TxDOT for that road. So we went to Washington. We lobbied Henry Cuellar, and helped us a lot to be able to get those funds to develop Cuatro Vientos Road. Big project. The other big project that we implemented was the wind energy farms. Wind energy farms. A $700 million investment that came into the county. So we did a lot. We worked a lot. So I can tell you that I think my track record speaks for itself of things that we've done, and we see where we go from there.
Sure, no. And tomorrow you have an event coming up. No, you have Fito Olivares. Where's that going to be at?
It's going to be.
Talk to us a little bit about that.
It's going to be at the Casablanca Ballroom, and like I'll tell you this. Last year, people started to call me. People started to see, Judge, hey, we want you back. We want you to come back. We need you back. So just in talking to people, talking and visiting, and I think it's in my blood that I need to be back somehow or another to be able to impact lives. So I'll be tomorrow at the Casablanca Ballroom, where I started in 1982. Actually, in 1982, my first event and my first public event or public announcement was at Casablanca Ballroom. So I'm going back to my roots there at Casablanca to visit, to talk to people. We have Fito Olivares, so hopefully you guys can join us and join us there. Sure. Yeah, I'll be making an announcement tomorrow of of what direction we're going to take. For me, it's always been, Paul, of impacting lives. And I've gotten a lot of feedback from people. I've been walking. I started actually walking since April, just visiting, knocking on doors, and talking to people, and people that I've met through the years, people that I've helped throughout the years. I share a story with you because, again, I'm full of stories, so you want me to cut off?
No.
So
Go right ahead.
I was knocking on the door, And this lady comes out, and she looks at me, and but when I do the block walking, I'm wearing a cap and glasses and stuff. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's about 102 degrees, and I knocked on the door, and this lady comes up. Lady comes out, and she says, "You're not Judge Valdez." I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am." And she goes, "Well," I said, "Take off your cap." So I took off my cap. "Take off your glasses." I took off my glasses. And I'm going to tell you in Spanish what she said. Sí, ese es Juez Valdez, sí eres. Digo, ¿sabes por qué? Digo, porque tengo una queja de ti. Digo, oh boy. I was trying to think, well, maybe she had to go pay a fine, or maybe she had to post a bond. I wonder what it is. I said, okay, dígame, ¿qué es la queja, señora? Dijo, usted me casó hace 30 años. And she said, but she was kidding with me. But those are the folks that I see, that I when I knock on the door. But she was happy to see me, and she says, well, okay, no se vaya, pues, no se vaya.
Did you bring out the picture?
No. Well, she goes into her house, and she comes out with a plate of albóndigas.
Oh, well.
She goes, mira, aquí está para que coma. Yeah. But people like that I see now, that I meet or that I talk to along the way, that are anxious for me to maybe come back and maybe make a difference somewhere. So that's what I've been listening to, and tomorrow we'll see where it goes. But I plan on I've listened to a lot of people. In fact, this morning I had a breakfast with some really, really close friends that have impacted my life since I first started. People like, if you remember, Lucas Galvan,
sure.
Meme Flores was there talking to me, Pancho Ochoa, Francisco Ochoa, Tojo Perez, all those guys that know about me. They know how I started, that know my background, they know what I've done, just exchanging ideas. What do you guys think? And they're all excited. They're all excited, that because I like to listen to people. It's not something that if I do something, it's not because this is what because this is what I want to do. It's based on what I hear, based on what people tell me, and I've always gone by what my gut says, what my heart says. So we'll see tomorrow, and we're excited. I'm excited, and look forward to having you guys there. You want to go and listen to Fito Olivares.
We'll go.
Just don't say we're going to go see Fito Olivares. We're not going to go see you. But that's fine. I can understand that.
But no, that's great. I want to tell you one thing. Several years ago, I don't know if you remember, we started a project with USA Savant.
Mm-hmm.
It was the World Pugilist Hall of Fame, which is coming up in November, where we invite people from all over the world. And you showed up there, and you gave us a proclamation that we had November 4th, Webb County had recognized USA Savant Day. Remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
And it's something that impacted with all the kids that are there, because these are programs that hopefully, it's not for one, it's for them, for the future. That we can get these kids going, and when they come back from their colleges and from the Army, and that many serve, and we thank them.
Paul, and let me just add this, because you're here and we're talking, and sometimes you don't get a pat on the back. But I will tell you this, that you impact lives. Whether you think so or not, or know so or not, you're impacting lives by having them there, by making sure that they're occupied,
sure,
and developing there, and you talking to them, because they need mentors. Whether it's through Sabat, whether it's through
karate, whatever it is, we have to be out there. We have to be out there helping them out, and it's sometimes it's difficult, because I see a lot of kids that do not have the funding. The
Correct.
Parents do not have the money. I've talked to several. I remember when Keiko Martinez was a commissioner.
Mm-hmm.
Him and Constable Rudy Rodriguez. I told him, hey, we need to get some of these kids out. I
Right.
got kids in Peñitas, and they opened up a club over there in Peñitas that was there for years. And we taught for free.
Right.
I said, just buy the gloves, buy what they need, and we'll go out there and teach. And I started teaching them. Attorney Jimmy Sandoval was the one that used to drive out there and teach them.
Right.
And all of a sudden it was stopped. They ended up putting Zumba. But it's one of those kids that started there is now doing 3 tours, and he's an airborne ranger. His name is Robert Perez, and he came out of us from there.
And if you look at what I've done through the years, we do the SOS,
Sure.
school supply drive.
Sure.
Why is that important? Because of the fact that, going back to what I saw throughout my career, there, that if kids go to school without school supplies, something basic, they're going to lose interest.
Yeah.
So why do you do this school supply drive? for that reason. Again, going back to little boy, we need to help. If it's school supplies, it's school supplies. The other thing that I'm very passionate about, Paul, and I think you've seen it, is the fishing derby that I do
for but you've had it for many years.
28 years. The physically challenged kids go fishing. Now, I continued that. And why is that important? Because, again, you have children that have special needs that really don't have an opportunity to do anything. Now it's a huge event, a big event that we do, and people and even the population, they look forward to that.
Sure.
And sometimes I see them out on the street. A lot of these kids say, "Judge, you're going to do the fishing derby?" They go like, "Yeah, we're going to do the fishing derby." And the good thing is we've always had community support.
And you've continued with it.
We continued with
and
it.
Even though you haven't been in office, so it shows your character, shows that I'm going to continue doing what it is, and that's helping.
And one of the things that I've always done when I was there, and is scholarships for kids.
Sure.
Especially kids that need a little push to get into college. I gave thousands of dollars in scholarships.
See, excuse me for interrupting, but I see a lot of money and funding to open new prisons and open new jails and open new incarceration systems and blah, 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 blah. But I have yet to see all those funding. Let's stop the drugs here. Let's get the kids in this program over here and stuff like that. I don't see that. And that's where I think you all that are public officials out there have to stand up and say, hey, you know what? We're tired of sending our kids to jail.
Always remember, always carry this, and I always say this, the prevention, intervention, before
incarceration,
before detention.
No, before detention. Yeah.
So if you carry that, and you keep that in mind, you're always going to find and push for the prevention and intervention.
Exactly.
But again, it takes a lot of effort. It's consuming, and you have to have that person or those persons that are willing to do that, to dedicate the time, because it is consuming. And again, it's just something that I did, and it always just going back to the first-hand knowledge that I had in dealing with these issues, Paul, and so we're getting ready to see what the future holds. I have a lot of faith, and that whatever decision we make or whatever direction we take, it's always going to be with what's in the best interest of
people.
So we'll see, and I'm optimistic that whatever direction we take, it's going to be again positive.
And those that you've touched will always back you up in whatever decision you take. And if it's going back into it, throwing your name in a hat somewhere, you're going to see a lot of people behind you.
Yeah,
and we wish you the best.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that very much. And again, I'm excited. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit different because, remember when I ran, I was 27, 28. I'm not 27, 28. So it's a little bit more, but still, it's still, I still feel it that we can do more.
Sure.
And there's opportunities to be able to get funding, to be able to support programs that focus on the elderly, focus on the children. I'm a veteran. I spent 4 years in the Navy. I'm partial to veterans. The special needs kids, very partial to that. Of course, our teachers, I know that I have a lot of good teachers. It's a very difficult job, very taxing job, but, we need to support our teachers. So, it's something that I've done throughout my career, and so, I'm hoping that I can continue that, and we'll see what the future holds.
Well, again, thank you for being here.
Appreciate it.
And
thank you
the
for
best
the
of luck, and we'll be there.
Thank you Thank you for the forum.
Anytime. This is open for everybody, because this is a place that we can talk about not only public officials, laws that are needed, and we started this little show here as a means to get people to understand things that are going out in the community, things that are going to affect in the community. And we bring from martial artists from the Philippines, was one of the first ones, to knife makers. That knife laws are changing here in the state of Texas. Just changed. Now you can carry a Bowie when you couldn't carry a Bowie in August. Now you can carry a Bowie. In fact, you can carry a sword now. But do we see people doing? No, but people need to understand that these laws exist.
And it's a good forum because if you're an elected official, then you need to come here and sit here and you know, take the tough questions and respond. I see here you have my good friend Sergio Mora here with you,
Yeah,
and
he's
Sergio is
excellent, you know.
very knowledgeable. You know, he's been through the political process, the political arena, and he's very knowledgeable, and he knows. So I'm glad that he's here with you. I think I told you right now, I don't know if I told you, but when I was in a debate and they told me, hey, but Judge Valdez is a career politician. I said, no, I'm a career public servant.
Well, that's exactly right, and that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
And we started, and one of the questions said, why are you starting this? You know, what does martial arts really impact in the community? Well, number one, martial arts training, it's a big facet of things, you know, it's a big goal prism. Well, every police officer, every peace officer has to take some kind of hand-to-hand defensive tactics. Then you have the combative tactics of everybody that went to the service has to understand self-defense. So if martial arts doesn't impact our community, then we have to understand why. You know?
And the good thing is, again, when I talk about these things, Paul, that we're talking about is, again, I talk a lot sometimes, and I repeat myself a lot, but I think it's essential that if you're a public servant, then you've got to be hands-on.
Yeah.
You've got to be hands-on, and you've got to walk the streets, knock on doors to see what's going on. Why is that child in court?
Sure.
Why is he here?
And
you know,
and
once you go and visit the house,
then
the
you realize
why.
you realize what is going on with the child. You know, we get in what we do. We get a lot of people from different fields. We get folks that professionals to people that from all working class, all levels of society, and they come in there and they all hug each other and they put on the gloves and they all punch at each other. They all learn with each other and they respect each other. And later on in the streets, they're helping each other out, and that's the beauty of this. And
I'm going to tell you something that's very important, and I think I don't know how much time we have, but I'll tell you this: that there's elected officials that once they get elected, you won't see them.
You won't see them again
You'll
until
see
4
him,
years.
You'll see him every
Every 4 years,
2 years, or
every 4 years, yeah.
yeah.
And they'll come back and they'll shake hands, and I go, hey, wait a minute, you know. And not that you bug a public official, but you know, if you have something to do, there's very few public officials out there that you pick up the phone and you know what, we have a problem on this street. They're the first ones there looking, and they're very few.
You'll see him. You'll probably see him at the WBCA parade.
Sure, they'll see him waving in the car.
You'll probably see him at the fairs, but you know, you need to be hands-on.
Exactly right.
Hands-on, people to know who you are. I mean, if you're an elected official or a representative, they need to know who you are.
Yeah.
And you know, it's not happening. So, you know, we'll see where that leads us. Again, you know.
Again, good luck, and the most positive of everything that comes to your way.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that.
Thank you for standing up again.
Thank you. Appreciate that very much. It means a lot. I know that we've talked a lot, we've dealt with a lot, but again, I appreciate this opportunity, and you'll probably see me here more often.
No, you will, and you're welcome. The doors are open. And for tomorrow, everybody, Fito Olivares, and more important, Judge Danny Valdez, and let's see what the future brings. Again, until next time here in Gloves Off.